It's your favorite Nutanix TME from Canada. We're going to be going through the traffic flows in Azure for our Nutanix Cloud clusters on Azure. We're going east and west, north and south. We're going to show you how a virtual machine is exiting the cluster, going through our Flow Gateway VM and out into the World Wide Web, which might even possibly be making its way back to your on-prem environment. I would encourage you to quickly take a look at a series done by a fellow TME, Eric Walters, around flow networking, which focuses on the on-prem side, but there is a lot of carryover and will help you to understand what we're doing here. Let's jump in. In our previous architecture video, we were looking at the different requirements around VNets and some of the configuration settings. Now here we have a physical topology of our Azure environment. So we have the delegated to Azure hosted bare metal service where our bare metal hosts are sitting. So here we have the HV IP address appearing. And then our Prism Central VNet, where Prism Central gets deployed in a scale-out fashion, we have an additional internal and external VNet. This is for our Flow Gateway VM, which is going to give us that north and southbound traffic. So you will get IPs in both of these networks. And you'll also see these secondary IPs. When we deploy the Flow Gateway VM, we're also deploying 50 additional IPs that can be used for floating IP. So if you have an application that needs inbound access, you can configure them to a virtual machine. And we'll also use these IPs for the VPC net. So as you create new Nutanix virtual private clouds, so you can have multiple of them, each one will consume one of these IPs. Now, in terms of east-west traffic, we have two UVMs residing in the same VPC. And so it's the same way that it would work on-prem. These VM on HV1 will flow through. We'll encapsulate the traffic on HV1, then deliver it to HV2, decapsulate it, and then give it to UVM2. So that's a pretty simple use case. Now, in terms of going out to our Azure VM, we have this UVM sitting on HV2. You see that the traffic is getting redirected to our HV3 host. This is because every VPC has a NAT. Typically on the on-prem environment, this would be sent to an external network that you would configure, but in our case, we're directing it to the Flow Gateway VM. So we see the source and the destination. So the destination is our Azure virtual machine, and then the source is the VM itself. It comes to this host, and then we encapsulate it in Geneva, which are now our source is going to be the actual HV host, and the destination is going to be our Flow gateway on the internal NIC. And so the traffic goes and reaches our Flow Gateway VM on the internal NIC, and then once it gets here, we will de-encapsulate it, and then our source will be these 10.75.161.40, which is the NAT that was used for this HV3 host, which we also see here as the source destination when it leaves the host. And it is consuming one of these 50 IPs, which I'd mentioned before. And so then it can forward the traffic to the Azure virtual machine. And so likewise, the process is reversed. The traffic is going to come back down. It'll know about that this 10.75.161.40, and so it'll send it back to the Flow Gateway VM, and then our process is picked up here, and then we'll redirect the traffic back. That's how we're doing north and south traffic flows inside of our Azure environment. Now that we've seen the traffic flow of a virtual machine exiting the cluster, we're going to take a look in the next video on how our two-tiered VPC model works. This will help in addressing configuring your cluster in Azure. See you in the next video.